Welcome to the Sangani Show, where we will talk about everything health, wealth, and wisdom. I came to the US in 1983 from Mumbai, India with $10.45 in my pocket and with a big dream in my heart. Now, I'm a practicing cardiologist, a businessman, an entrepreneur, life mentor, and most importantly, a dad. I have lost some, I won some. But every time I lost or won, I learned even more. And my success has not been easy, but finally I made it. And my next mission is to help you do the same. Learn from my experiences, and that is life is a business. Hello, and welcome to the Sangani Show. And you guessed it right. My name is Dr. Bharat Sangani, your favorite doctor and your host. Today in the series that we started, Ask the Expert, we have a very special guest today. As you know, the last time we had a marketing expert on our show, Lindsay Hüttner, and today we have another key important part to build businesses is an expert in accounting, expert who generally is known as CFO. The viewers for this show belong to three categories: is health, wealth, and wisdom. For the wealth part, lots of entrepreneurs log into to view this show. And today we're going to talk about very important component of a business running. When I first started my business, first, I created the plan, and the first person we hired was a CFO. So, what is a CFO? I'm going to let our guest explain that to you. I'm just going to keep that acronym as this acronym. But let me first introduce our guest, the expert today. His name is Mr. Yatin Gandhi. He serves as a Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer of Encore Enterprises Incorporated, the same place where I work. He joined Encore in 2004 and quickly became a key member of the executive management team. Mr. Gandhi brings with him 25 years of experience with a strong background in the financial management and risk management functions of multiple real estate, non-real estate operating businesses in the space of casual dining and healthcare activities, etc. He also manages a significant portion of Encore's investments as private equity investments. So he has a varied view, varied experience of how all these businesses are done, and single-handedly he runs private company as well as multiple public companies that Encore Enterprises owns outright in various parts of the world. So welcome to our show, Yatin. It's always a pleasure to see you. The first question I'm going to start is, what is a CFO?
So first, thank you, Doc, for the introduction, and just to kind of give the audience a little bit of background about myself. I think Doc did a very good job at it. But I'm originally from India, and I have been living in United States for almost 21 years now. I was born in the middle class family in the city of Mumbai, and where we used to own about 300 square foot of house, and essentially with more than 8 people staying in that apartment. That was a time I realized that I better do something in life and better study so I can improve my standard of living and my quality of life. So with that desire, I got in me that the aspiration and the motivation to take my education seriously, and that was the beginning. So I kind of started, with my school, and originally I wanted to pursue engineering. Very soon I realized that engineering was a financial burden to my family. So I kind of started with changing the path to accounting. So I did my bachelor's with the major in accounting, and while I was doing my bachelor's, I did chartered accountancy, and that is one of the most accredited and acknowledged curriculum in the areas of accounting. So that's how I started my career with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and was there with the company for 3 years. And before I was planning to start my own independent practice, but the destiny had something else for me, and I was fortunate to come to United States. So being in the United States for 3 years, working for a public accounting firm, and then eventually joining Encore as a senior accountant. But to kind of answer Doc's question, CFO is all about numbers. CFO obviously stands for Chief Financial Officer, and as you know, it plays a very integral part of the company's success. So to me, CFO is someone who is not just talking about the historical financial. To me, CFO is somebody who is a strategic partner to the organization. It plays a very dual leadership role, not only of managing the people around you or reporting to you, but also the people who are in the operations working around you. So that's what the short answer, long answer to your short question.
No, it's very important distinction that you made, that in general, when people talk about accounting or CFO, they call it bean counting. And this used to be the term for the accountants and the CFOs in the past to identify them. But world has changed, as we have constantly seen. Enron probably would not have happened as the way it folded if there was the right CFO and the right precautions were taken. Unfortunately, a good CFO and bad CFO makes all the difference in the world. I personally, running a company, don't have enough time to look at the statistics, look at the financials of the company, and I really need a strong partner to run the company properly, because most of the people who are entrepreneurs, they're visionary, and they usually don't have time, or they ignore the telltale sign of impending failure or success, either way. And you need somebody else to measure those, for a lack of better word, measure those, count those beans, and then keep company in well-organized fashion. And that's why I always say, and even this show, we call it, you are only as good as your CFO. It's unbelievable how much a CFO, how much weighs in on a CFO's shoulders. So going back to that, please explain to our audience, what was the reason we chose CFO as the first position to fill in our organization when we started doing business, and why should everybody follow that path, that there is some accounting measure, whether it's a full-fledged CFO or a partial CFO or outsourced CFO, but some sort of accounting measure must be placed when a company starts transacting in the real world?
Yeah, I think one of the important things you mentioned was how the CFO plays a role in managing the entire organization. And what I would say here is one of the important traits of a CFO is uncompromised integrity and ethical standards. At the end of the day, we are the custodians of everyone's money. And who are those everyone? I mean, it's first obviously starts with the company and the owners. And when they're investing their money into the company and doing different businesses, it's very important for a CFO to ensure that the funds are properly deployed, they have been properly utilized, and there are no signs of any frauds or any issues surrounding any of those. Then we talk about the investors' money. So not only the investors are, they're bringing their hard-earned money into investing into the companies, it's important for us as a CFO to give them the correct picture, the right picture, and understand where exactly stands from the perspective of the overall project or the overall company. And the last is the lenders. The lenders are also investing in the company in the form of a debt structure and a debt instrument. So thereby, it's very important for them to understand where the projects are headed, how things are moving along in the company, and how operationally the company is doing. So that's where the CFO plays a very active role in passing on the messages to the different groups of people and acting more as a custodian for their money.
Now, that's a very important distinction you made. Integrity and compliance are two very important factors I always mention for success as an individual or as a company. And CFO is that guard who manages that compliance and the integrity, and that's very well said. So tell us, what should a budding entrepreneur or a company should look for in a CFO? Tomorrow, let's say I start another company and I'm looking for a CFO. How do I find a CFO? And then what do I look for once I have 5 people in front of me to decide who to hire?
Sure. No, I think this is a very important point you made of hiring a right person in the company. It is important not only for the CFOs, for everyone you hire in the company, that it fits your culture. So that's the key to hiring anybody. Talking specifically about a CFO, I think the more, apart from the traditional responsibilities and the traditional functions a CFO does, it is important for the CEO or the person or management hiring the CFO to understand what is the broader horizon he's coming with. Is he seeing a bigger picture? It is not just about reporting the historical financials. It is how about reporting the financials, analyzing the financials, making sure that with the analysis, he comes up with the more meaningful report to the organization, which eventually helps them make good decisions. So that's the key. I mean, it is not just about hey, here are the reports, and you decide what you want to do. It's playing a very important role in deciding with the CEOs and the management of what actions to be taken, what are the places where there are strengths, what are the places there are weaknesses, and accordingly guide the management to take right decisions. So that's where the key. Now, obviously, the second thing is the reliability and the dependability, which is very important. And then the last thing I would say is working under pressure. This is the most important thing, I think, someone should ask a CFO, because to a CFO, accounting is a science and an art. To a CEO, everything is done yesterday. So to create that balance between the CFO and the management, it is very important that you be able to work under that pressure, meet your deliverables, send accurate information, and then kind of still get things done on time. So that's the important piece, that working under pressure becomes an important element for a CFO.
I think that's very important point, which I didn't even think of, that it's a very responsible position. And besides the integrity and compliance, just presenting the number itself doesn't mean anything. And most of us, what I used to remember, and I might be mixing up the companies, but the Southwest airline, the people who really ran the company in the past, they made a really most successful airline company in the history of airlines. And I was told that they did not know how to even read the financials. They're totally dependent on CFO. So that's how important this position is. And understanding the numbers and representing the numbers to the management in the way it makes sense is the right way for the CFO to be in that position, to be justifying that position that he is in. Having discussed about what should we look for the CFO, what are the jobs CFO does, now let's talk about what are the certain parameters that tells you that the company is financially healthy.
And that's the question everybody wants to understand and look into when they actually study the company. To me personally, as a CFO, I would feel one of the most important factor is the liquidity. As we always say, cash is the king, and cash in bank is the ultimate test of every successful business, how the business has done from where it started to where we are today. So liquidity obviously solves the short-term, the working capital needs of the company. And the next thing I would think of would be the solvency. And what it means is, what is the company's ability today to pay the short-term and the long-term debt? Does company has enough reserves built in? whether it would be in the form of an investments or a liquid cash or marketable securities, either way, but does the company has today the ability to pay their short-term and long-term debt? So that's all talking about the solvency. The third is the operating efficiencies. Especially when you're running a business, the operating margins, they form a very key statistics to the organization who are actually operating the businesses. So, I mean, you may sell a burger for $10, but if your cost of making a burger is $9, doesn't make sense. So it's important thing is, where are your operating margins? So that's another area where essentially you need to look at is to, are we meeting the margins as per the industry standards, or are we over budgeting, and are we actually even crossing over those standards? So that's the important thing. And the last thing, which people generally don't see, but I still look at net profit at the end of the day, because there are companies like the Teslas of the world where they were negative cash flow in the first several years. In Amazon's, you know about the Amazon story. So these are the companies where they eventually started with a negative working capital, negative funding, and then a negative net income. But eventually the true test is when they're actually getting positive. And that's the sign which is important, that how long does it take for operations or a business unit to become from negative to positive, and the faster it is, the more successful business it is. So that's where these are the parameters to see, and all of these eventually, you know, translates to the net worth, you know, and higher the net worth, essentially, it stronger the company is.
Again, viewers, entrepreneurs, we are always thinking in terms of growth. We are always thinking in terms of product. We are always thinking in terms of services. But what Yatin just mentioned in the last answer to the question is so important to run the company properly. You must pay attention for all these items that he mentioned, starting from liquidity all the way to net worth, or in between your ability to pay short-term, long-term debt and stay in business. If you miss out, these are the basic fundamentals of running a business. And the only person who truly can keep this in line is your CFO. CFO is a very important position in your company. Please don't discount it. Please don't try to cut corners around this kind of work that is needed to make a company successful. And Yatin's ideas are really worth noting it and see how that can make you successful. Every entrepreneur I've met, I always said, make sure you have enough liquidity. And it always goes opposite, right? When you are just a budding entrepreneur, you never have enough cash. You always have grand visions. And 85% of the small businesses, they end up closing in the first 2 years because they have not thought through what will happen in a bad situation where the cash will dry out. And trust me, it happens to every single business, and it's how you get out of that situation or you prepare for the situation is the most important part. Having said that, Yatin, tell us, just dovetailing to this discussion, what is the value of budget in a business, and how does a CFO play a role in the budget formation?
Very, very important. I think one of the things which I always kind of tell my management is there an acceptance of the budget in a right and a positive attitude by the team who are actually going to be executing the budget. See, that's where the biggest disconnect today is, where the top management, the executives are giving the milestones. There is a disconnect between talking to the people who are actually going to be running with those budgets and trying to ensure that those budgets are met. So the critical piece, first, to answer your question, Doc, budgets are very important in essentially laying out a foundation as to where the company is going to eventually end. And there are ways to do budgets. People do budgets for 1 year, people do budgets for 5 years, 10 years. I personally believe budgets for 1 year are the most productive budgets, because it's very difficult to predict 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now in terms of the numbers. But once you predict the first year of budget, it's important that you predict that budget with the help of your management, with the help of your operations team. So when you engage them and then essentially uh, work with them to create a budget. It makes a more sensible budget. And when you have a budget, you can plan your activities. What it helps you do is, you know what kind of resources do you need for that specific unit. You allocate those resources, and then you have, ample cash available outside of the requirements, which you can deploy for other units. So that's why the budget becomes a very critical piece. But also, it is not just about creating a budget. It is also about executing and making sure that there is an accountability built into it. Because a lot of people, they create budgets and they feel happy about it. Hey, we have a budget, we're going to make hundreds and millions of dollars. But how are you monitoring it during the year? Every month, you should be monitoring that with your operations team to see we are on track. Is there an accountability factor built in? There should be a balanced scorecard, with all these individuals, to ensure that every single line item on the budgets are not only been reviewed, monitored, but they're also being asked about questions as if they're not in budget. So again, budget are very important if they are followed through in the full cycle. Just creating a budget and just sitting on it, and then at the end of the year, if you don't meet budgets, and hey, what happened? And it's not worth. So it's important that we essentially create those budgets and then walk with them every single month, and essentially make sure that if there are ins and outs, if there are overs or unders, we essentially review them and then discuss them and essentially follow up to them.
So, such an important point. Viewers, I always maintain liquidity and budget. Two things in running a business should never be ignored. And there are a bunch of other things too, but these two are the top two. Budget is very, very important. Trust me, if something doesn't make sense on a paper, I promise you, it's not going to make sense in real life. And today we are sitting here with a money man, the CFO or the money man, right? And no discussion is over or is meaningful unless we talk about how to save taxes. Because there are two ways to make money, right? One is to make money, work hard, and then create revenues. And the second is to pay less taxes. Now, I hate to use the word pay less taxes because it kind of creates a negative connotation to it. But be as it may, our economy has been built on structure that is called tax incentives, tax deferrals, things like that, which supposedly enhances the economy on a long run basis. So Yatin, tell us a little bit about what businesses can do to save taxes, and all the way up to opportunity zone that you and I have enjoyed thoroughly over the past few years.
No, definitely. And one of the things, and this is a kind of a joke in our community, and since you are a physician here, you can very well relate to it. It says that when a patient comes to a doctor, and if a doctor makes a mistake, what happens? Patient dies. Okay. So then accountant comes in here, the CPA, and he says, you know what? When a client comes to me, and if we make a mistake, what happens? So the client commits suicide. So it's in both the scenarios, the ultimate message is that we have to be very diligent, and you have to be very careful of what we do and what we say. And tax is such a thing where, this is the last dollar going out of the pocket, and it goes to the IRS, assuming they never come back. So it's important that you do have a proper strategy surrounding the tax matters. So to kind of answer your question, there are different strategies, depending on the industry. There are so many reforms, there are so many incentives available today, especially in the market where we are, depending on the kind of business you are in. If you're in a real estate business, there are opportunities about qualified opportunity zones, the bonus depreciation strategies. When you talk about the operating businesses, there are those credits for opportunity credits, and I think they call it the WOTC credits there. So these are the other options where, depending on the kind of the businesses you are, you can tap into those areas. But again, you need to think from the long-term perspective rather than a short-term perspective. None of those tax strategies are going to get benefit in year one, year two. If you look from the global perspective, from the long-term perspective, those savings are going to come eventually to us. But again, there are different ways to handle and tackle it depending on the kind of industry you are in.
Sure. So, and I'm sure Micah will put Yatin's contact info. Feel free to reach out to Yatin. He's very busy individual, but I'm sure he will guide you through this for any questions you may have. And again, thanks again to the viewers for tuning in today. Please, as I always finish up by saying, follow us on all social media. We are present, even though I'm not a great social media player. I got great people who help me keep a presence always alive. There are interesting news on the social media. Feel free to go to the website www.bharatsangani.com and sign up for the newsletter for the Life is a Business today. And this was our second episode for our Ask the Expert today. And Yatin, thank you again for coming and giving us great insight.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all the listeners here. Any questions, as Doc says, always welcome to reach out to me, and happy to answer to the extent I can. Thank you again.
Thank you, and see you guys again soon.